Hi everyone, I'm Paul Chandler, host of the Paul Chandler Show. In tonight's episode, we're going to be using the Padzilla, and we're going to be watching a simple skin repair closure occurring. And while it's going on, I'll be dictating what the provider is doing, so that way, as far as coders, we can know what the doctor did during the surgery, so we can link it up to the words that we're going to be looking for in the documentation to do the coding. So stay tuned and we'll be right back when tonight we'll be exploring a simple skin repair closure on the Padzilla. Welcome back everyone. So now we're going to be looking at to see how a simple repair closure is surgically performed. And don't worry, we're not going to be looking at it on a live human, except lovely videos on how providers will use as far as learning education, not live actual patients. So starting out the video here. So first we have the doctor then loads the needle between the apex of the curvature and 2/3 of the needle tip. Because as you see here, the needle itself is actually more of a curvature, like a hook, and then they straighten out the suture, and then the patient will have the skin gently lifted, and then the doctor will pierce the skin through the perpendicular of the skin itself with a suture, and they side paints the wrist so that the needle passes through the dermis and rises out of the middle of the wound. So you see then as it goes into the dermis, goes underneath and loops back around. Then the provider will regrasp the needle and lift it out of the wound itself, and then using the forceps to hold the needle while reloading the needle holder. So then that way then we see it as in the hook going through and into the other side with the forceps itself. And then using the curvature of the needle then, it's going through the other side and hooks in right there. And then as the needle hooks through, then now we have the suture is going in one side, underneath the other, and loops back around. And then the provider will pull it away, then loops around to be able to create the base point of it on one end. And then the provider will hold the needle towards the non-dominant hand away from the first knot. So the provider has to create a first knot on one end to be able to then repeat the procedure all the way down. And after we have that loop secure, then the provider will grasp the suture with the needle holder and push the needle holder away and bring the non-dominant hand towards the lay of the second knot. So then basically we have that nice secure knot on one end, and then begins with the security of it. And then now the provider will loop the suture around. And as we see here, it's looping around the metal part, then goes back down. So there we have the secure base on the one end. So in that way, then the sutures won't be ripping off on one end after it goes all the way down to the side. And the provider will cut the suture. So we have the secure knot. And then at this point now, the provider's been doing that. This is the 7th time that has already been done. So now we're on number 8. So the same as in redoing the same process, holding the curvature of the needle through one side and having it loop through underneath and pulling the suture straight through, then pulling the skin back to loop it underneath and hook it underneath the other side and place that curvature hook back around. So now the suture is underneath, again, just like we had before, all of the layer of the skin, going down all the way through underneath the cut and up through the other side. And the provider then, again, just making that knot there. And then by looping the knot and securing it, that way then we have that highly secured knot with at least 2 knots in there, so that way then the suture won't break. So by having 2, in this case the providers did their 3rd knot, creates more of extra support. So then that way then the skin won't break, and it'll be having the epidermis layer go together up on top and secure the base there. And after the provider makes the knot, then they go through and cut the ends off of it. And so that's how the providers will perform a simple repair or simple closure, where they have the curvature hook. It goes underneath one layer of skin on one side of where the cut is. The provider will pull it through for some length there. Then take the hook on the other side, loop it under. So that way then you have the cut, and then you have the suture going underneath both sides. They'll secure it up on top with usually 3 knots. And then however the length of the suture is, and that's how many knots then they'll do for the simple repair. And so I do thank you for watching this episode of the Paul Chandler Show, where we looked at clinically how providers will perform a simple repair closure. And have an awesome rest of your day.